Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with my Week 13 NFL predictions. Last week, not the week I was hoping for, 9-5. I did have the Texans and the Giants covering. However, Week 12 played out the way I said it would play out. I said that it would be a very favorable week for the favorites. I said at least 10 favorites will win, and exactly 10 favorites won outright, but a lot of them didn't cover. I talked about how over the years, the week before Thanksgiving, a lot of the games are closer than expected, but it still tends to be a favorable week for the favorites to win outright, but not cover. We had the Lions, Seahawks, Ravens, all significantly favored. All double-digit favorites, and none of those three covered. The Patriots, favored by more than a touchdown. They did not cover. I knew that upsets would be minimal. I unfortunately just predicted the wrong favorites. Nothing I can do about it now. All I can do is just move forward to this week. What does Week 13 have in store for us? We have a very stacked lineup on Thanksgiving Day. Packers and Lions, Chiefs and Cowboys, which may end up being the most watched regular season game in NFL history. We also have the Bengals and the Ravens, where Joe Burrow is anticipated to make his return. We also have the Bears and the Eagles on Black Friday. 49ers and Browns, where Shedeur Sanders has been named the starter once again this week for the Browns. Texans and Colts, which in my opinion, that game should have been flexed to either Sunday night or Monday night. Bills and Steelers, and a whole lot more. Without further ado, let's get to the Week 13 NFL predictions right here on the Johnny Sports Network. The first of the three Thanksgiving Day games, Packers and Lions. The Lions, they historically have not done well on Thanksgiving, but they got the win on Thanksgiving last year, where it was the infamous game where Matt Eberflus did not call a timeout. These two went against each other in Lambeau in Week 1, where the Packers won 27-13. It was a game where the Packers dominated from start to finish, and the Lions got a late touchdown to make that game look closer than what it was. Both of these teams are in the top 10 in the NFL in total defense. Packers 4th, Lions 9th. The Packers, they have the best third down conversion percentage in the league, converting on third down 49.3% of the time. I do wonder if history is going to repeat itself, as a couple years ago when these two played on Thanksgiving Day. The Packers, they had a big win, and then they went on the road for Thanksgiving Day against the Lions. They won, and it ended up being huge momentum for the Packers moving forward. But I don't know if I can see that this time, because Jordan Love has thrown for less than 180 passing yards in 4 of the last 6 games. Even though we saw the Packers dominate against the Lions in Week 1, the Lions, they have, without a doubt, been the much better team since then. The Packers last week, they covered for only the second time since Week 3. And people have talked about the Thanksgiving Day curse for the Lions, but I think that they have denounced that curse on Thanksgiving Day by winning last year against the Bears. And I think they win here. I just think the Lions, they've just been a much better team than the Packers since the last meeting in week 1. I think the Lions, they get their redemption against the Packers. Chiefs and Cowboys in the second of 3 Thanksgiving Day games. It is possible that this could be the most viewed regular season game in NFL history. Both of these teams enter this game off an emotional victory. Chiefs against the Colts in overtime. Cowboys against the Eagles, where the Cowboys were down 21-0 and ended up scoring 24 unanswered to pull off the upset. And what a matchup we have in this game. The two top passing offenses in the league. The Cowboys lead the NFL in total offense, averaging 387.3 yards a game. You could make the argument that whoever wins this game, it's a season-saving victory for them. Because right now, both of these teams, they are 10th in their conference standings. Chiefs currently 10th in the AFC, Cowboys currently 10th in the NFC. The Cowboys' run defense has been excellent the last 2 games. But how much can you trust their secondary? I think this is going to be a high-scoring game because there's this anticipation that this game could break the record for most watched regular season game of all time. I feel like if that were the case, you would not want it to be a low-scoring game. You would not want it to be a 13-17 type of game. You'd want it to be in the high 30s. I'm going to predict the Chiefs to win, and I do anticipate it will be a high-scoring game. In fact, I will be very surprised if the total is under. I don't know what the over-under is right now, but whatever it is, I'll be surprised if it ends up going under. And I will make a bold prediction for this game. I think that there's going to be a trick play by the Chiefs where Travis Kelce ends up throwing a touchdown pass. I don't know why, but I've had that feeling for weeks that he ends up throwing a touchdown pass on a trick play in this particular game. Again, I don't know why. I've just had this feeling for weeks. The third and final Thanksgiving Day game, Bengals and Ravens. For the Bengals, it is anticipated Joe Burrow makes his return after missing the last couple of months with turf toe. And I am surprised that he is back this soon because it was originally said that it'd be at least 3 months. But Joe Burrow's return, at least his anticipated return, it adds more excitement to this game because early on in the season when both teams were struggling, people were talking about how this wasn't going to be a watchable game. But now Joe Burrow, expected to be back, and Lamar Jackson has been back for a few weeks now, a handful of weeks. This adds more excitement to the matchup. Right now, the Ravens are currently favored by 7 points. The reason why that is significant, 5 of the last 7 games between these two teams decided by less than 7. Looking at the matchups for Thanksgiving Day, I have a feeling one of the favorites is not going to cover. And I think the Ravens, they're the most likely candidate for that. The Chiefs are currently favored by 3. I think it's possible that could end up being a push. Because I did pick the Chiefs to win the high-scoring game, this one I think could be a high-scoring game as well. Jamar Chase is back after serving a 1-game suspension. If Joe Burrow would have returned last week, like it was possible that he would, maybe I would pick the Bengals to pull off this upset, but I think with it being his first game back in a couple of months, I think it'll be at least a game or two by the time he returns to the Joe Burrow that we all know. I'm going to go with the Ravens, but something tells me the Bengals, they do cover in this game. So I will be taking the Bengals +7 because I think it's possible that this game ends up being a push because history shows that this is going to be a close game. Bears and Eagles on Black Friday. The Bears continuing their winning streak, their latest win at home against the Steelers, while the Eagles, a 21-0 lead, but they ended up surrendering 24 unanswered points. Costly turnovers costing the Eagles that game, and it looked like it was going to be a runaway game for the Eagles. The Eagles, it looked like they were going to win very handily, but then everything started to go wrong for them. Going into the game last week, the Eagles' offense only produced a total of 26 points in their recent 2 games. The Bears, they have a +16 turnover margin, the best in the NFL. And currently, in my opinion, Bears head coach Ben Johnson, the frontrunner for head coach of the year. I do think the Eagles, they do recover from last week. They respond and they get the win at home. However, I like the Bears to cover in this game. I'm honestly surprised that the Eagles are favored by a touchdown, well, more than a touchdown, by 7 points in this game. Based off of what I've seen from both these teams in the last 4 weeks, I feel like it should be the Eagles only favored by 4.5. Because the Bears, they have been resilient, finding ways to win, while the Eagles, you could say the same thing. Their defense, they played lights out in their recent 2 games before last week. But I think this game is only about a 4 or 5 point victory for the Eagles, but I do think they get the win and respond from last week. 49ers and Browns. The 49ers, a solid win on Monday Night Football against the Panthers. However, it was a sloppy game for both teams. Brock Purdy, 3 interceptions in that game. And it's a short week for the 49ers. They go on the road to Cleveland, and there is a strong possibility of rain for this game. Shedeur Sanders has been named the starting quarterback for the Browns once again this week. Even though Dylan Gabriel did clear concussion protocol, Shedeur Sanders will be the starter in this game. Last week in his debut against the Raiders, 209 passing yards, a touchdown, an interception. The Browns are second in the NFL in total defense, allowing about 273 yards a game. The 49ers only have 13 sacks on the season, the least in the NFL, while the Browns, second in the NFL in sacks behind the Broncos, with 42 on the season. Last week, when predicting the Bills and the Texans on Thursday night, I was very close to picking the Texans to pull off the upset, but the way the matchup looked to me, it looked like a game where the Bills were only going to win by 3. That's why I took the points with the Texans. This matchup feels like it could be very similar, where the 49ers, they only win by 3 points. However, I am not going to back down in predicting an upset this week. I'm going to pick the Browns to pull off this upset. And I feel confident about this because the 49ers, they have not won in Cleveland since 1984. Even if the Browns don't pull off this upset, I don't see the 49ers covering in this game. Jaguars and Titans. The Titans looking for their second win of the season, their only win on the year so far. A win against the Cardinals, where the Cardinals essentially handed them that victory. Meanwhile, the Jaguars, an overtime victory against the Cardinals last week on the road. At the very least, I know that morale victories don't mean much in the NFL, but the Titans, a 6-point loss to the Seahawks last week, they did cover against them. I do have no doubt in my mind that Cam Ward is going to show that he belongs in this league as time progresses. And if I'm the Titans and if the Dolphins part ways with Mike McDaniel, I would honestly go ahead and hire Mike McDaniel because I think it's really worth the chance. However, that is another conversation for another day, but I'm going to pick the Jaguars to win and cover the 6.5 points. I think they win by at least 7 points. But I am curious and intrigued to see what kind of effort we see from the Titans. They had a good effort last week. They've had some good efforts this season, but they don't have the victories to show for it. I will pick the Jaguars. I like the momentum they're on from the victory in overtime last week. Texans and Colts, and it's pretty disappointing that this game did not get flexed into primetime. And I have nothing against the Broncos and Commanders and Giants and Patriots, but I feel like 99 out of 100 people would want to see this matchup on primetime. I don't know if it's because the Texans will be playing on primetime 2 weeks in a row, but this is going to be a game where something is going to have to give. The Texans with the best defense in the league from a statistical standpoint, and the Colts' high-octane offense. It's unknown if C.J. Stroud will return for the Texans this week, as he's been in concussion protocol. The Texans with a big confidence-boosting win last week against the Bills on Thursday night, while the Colts, an emotional loss against the Chiefs, where it looked like the Colts, they had the Chiefs defeated, but then the Chiefs, they made their comeback to win in overtime. Also, it was announced recently that Joe Mixon may not play at all this season for the Texans, as he has not played all season. He was placed on IR to start the season. So it's going to be Nick Chubb and Woody Marks leading the Texans backfield for the rest of the season. I'm going to take the Texans to win this game, regardless if it's Davis Mills or CJ Stroud at quarterback, because I like the momentum the Texans are on, winning on Thursday night last week and having that extra rest factor to them. While the Colts, I think it's going to be tough for them to move on from what happened last week. A detrimental loss for the Colts where it looked like they were going to defeat the Chiefs, but they lost in overtime. I do think either way, though, the Texans, they do cover 4.5, because I only see the Colts win this game by 3 points. I think it's going to be that close to the game. Saints and Dolphins. The Saints upset by the Falcons at home last week. Saints favored by 1.5 in that game. Dolphins had their bye week. The last time we saw the Dolphins on the football field against the Commanders in Madrid a couple weeks ago, where the Dolphins won a low-scoring game in overtime. I've said before this season, throughout the season, that I think the Dolphins, they part ways with Mike McDaniel. Going into the season, I said he was on the hot seat, but I do think he could stick around for 2026 if the Dolphins have a resurgence in this later part of the season. I have said countless times this season that I don't have many expectations for the Saints. Last week was a very winnable game for them. But the Falcons, they ended up winning. But I am going to go with the Dolphins in this game. I do think they have some momentum from the last 3 weeks. Dominant win against the Bills, an overtime win against the Commanders in Madrid, and the bye week. I do think some of their momentum carries over into this game, and the Dolphins, they get the victory. I do think it's a 7-point victory for the Dolphins. Falcons and Jets. The Falcons ended their losing streak last week, defeating the Saints on the road, while the Jets, they gave it a good effort against the Ravens. They even covered in that game. Even though I feel like I say it every week, the Jets, they are a much better team than what their record shows. The Jets, they've been switching out quarterbacks frequently this season. We've seen them go from Justin Fields to Tyrod Taylor, back to Justin Fields, back to Tyrod Taylor. And it's unknown if it's going to be Justin Fields or Tyrod Taylor this week. At least as of this moment, I have not seen any news regarding that. This matchup, we have two talented running backs, Bijan Robinson for the Falcons, Breece Hall for the Jets. Drake London is expected to be out for this game once again for the Falcons this week. The Falcons defense is third in the NFL in sacks with 39 on the season. And the Falcons defense has been the strength of their team so far this season for the majority of the season, even though the Falcons defense, they've shown some vulnerabilities throughout the season. But for this game, I'm going to pick the Jets. I know that I say I rarely pick the Jets. I don't trust the Jets to win a game. But I trust the Jets before to win a game, and they pulled through, and I think they do this time around as well. Because this just feels like the type of game the Falcons lose. And the Jets, they end up winning. I will be going with the upset in this one. Cardinals and Buccaneers, both teams looking to respond from losses last week. Baker Mayfield left the game early for the Buccaneers last week with an AC sprain. The MRI showed that it's a low-grade sprain in his non-throwing shoulder. The timetable for his return as of this moment, it's unclear, but he hasn't been ruled out for this game yet. And it's possible he could return this week without missing a game at all. However, either way, no matter what they do, whether they have Baker Mayfield play, if he's good enough to play, or sit him, it's a tight race in the NFC South between them and the Panthers. And the Falcons, they're a couple games back, but maybe the Falcons, they could rally in this late part of the season and get into the mix. But it's possible we could see Jacoby Brissett versus Teddy Bridgewater in this game. And it'd be a game where I feel like I simply have to pick somebody to win. If Baker Mayfield plays, I'm definitely going to pick the Buccaneers to win. But I would lean towards him not playing in this game. But if he does play in this game, you know that the Cardinals, they're going to be very aggressive. They're going to put pressure on Baker Mayfield in this game. I would not be surprised if Baker Mayfield does play and the Cardinals get called for roughing the passer so many times in this game. Because they are going to want to get hits on Baker Mayfield in this game. But if we end up seeing Jacoby Brissett versus Teddy Bridgewater, I was thinking about the Cardinals, but I think I'll take the Buccaneers either way in this game. Because I don't know if I can trust the Cardinals at all, because every time I have backed them in this season. They've let me down. So I think I'll go with the Buccaneers either way. Rams and Panthers. The Rams' dominant win on Sunday night against the Buccaneers, while the Panthers' abysmal performance against the 49ers on Monday night. Both of these teams have been friendly against the spread so far this season. Rams 8-3 against the spread, tied with the Seahawks for the best record against the spread this season. Panthers 7-5 against the spread. The Rams are a significant favorite in this game, favored by 10.5 as of this moment. And for good reason. Matthew Stafford is playing MVP level football. 30 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions on the season. The Rams have also only accumulated 51 penalties this season, the least in the NFL. And the Rams, they are the most complete team in the NFL right now on both sides of the ball, at least in my opinion. With how the Rams have been playing this season and the Panthers with an abysmal performance last week offensively, there should be no reason the Rams don't win this game convincingly. But I think where that is wrong. I do think the Rams, they win this game, no doubt about it. However, this game is going to be in the early window. And we see that the West Coast teams traveling across the country for early window games, they tend to play flat. I think that does happen with the Rams this week, believe it or not. I think the Rams win, but I'm taking the Panthers to cover 10.5 points. We've seen the Panthers in the last couple of seasons compete very well against serious contenders. I think they do it again, but the Rams, they still get the win, but they don't win by more than 11 points. Vikings and Seahawks. For the Vikings, quarterback J.J. McCarthy, currently in concussion protocol. And it's looking like the Vikings will be starting Max Brosmer at quarterback in this matchup on Sunday. In the event that we do see J.J. McCarthy and he clears concussion protocol, he's thrown 10 interceptions this season, only 6 touchdown passes. However, I really doubt that we will see J.J. McCarthy clear concussion protocol because so far this season with the quarterbacks in concussion protocol, no quarterback has been able to clear concussion protocol within a week. And I think part of that is the NFL is wanting to be more serious with handling concussions. Or at least the NFL is being performative about it, but that's their topic for another day. I think regardless, whether J.J. McCarthy or Max Brosmer is at quarterback, I think the Seahawks, they win convincingly. Jackson Smith and Jigba leading the NFL in receiving yards with 1,313 on the season. The Vikings have given up 39 sacks this season, the 4th most in the NFL, and I honestly don't think this game is going to be close regardless of the Vikings quarterback situation. I think the Seahawks, even though the Vikings are a better defense than the Titans, and they only beat the Titans by 6 last week, I think they handle business and cover 10.5 points pretty easily. Bills and Steelers. The Bills last played on Thursday night. They were upset by the Texans on the road. And they are on the road again this week, traveling to Pittsburgh. The Steelers with a loss on the road last week against the Bears without Aaron Rodgers under center. It was Mason Rudolph. And the quarterback situation for the Steelers is currently unclear. The Bills' offensive line gave up 8 sacks against the Texans defense last Thursday night. The Texans defense, the number one defense in the league from a statistical standpoint. This week, however, the Bills are against an inconsistent defense. I've said it time and time again. The Steelers are either a top defense in the league or they are a complete liability. It's tough to predict Steelers games because a lot of their games are dictated by how the defense does. A lower scoring game and it's in the Steelers' favor. But in a high scoring game, they tend to lose those kinds of games because their defense is being a complete liability. I do think the Bills, they do recover from last week and they do get the win on the road. And given how the AFC North standings are, I'd say this would be a signature road win for the Bills. Plus, you know that I do tend to favor teams who played on Thursday or earlier in the week, the prior week, due to the extra rest factor. I am taking the Bills to win by a touchdown. Raiders and Chargers. The Chargers had their bye week last week, but I'm looking forward to seeing how the Chargers respond because the last time we saw them on the football field, they lost in dominant fashion to the Jaguars 35-6. And they are against a Raiders team, disappointing performance against the Browns. The Raiders did part ways with offensive coordinator Chip Kelly. Geno Smith this season, 13 touchdown passes, 13 interceptions. And in my opinion, the Raiders, they need to start Kenny Pickett, give him a chance with this offense. Because, in my opinion, it can't possibly get worse for the Raiders at this point in the season. And after the Raiders were a complete letdown against the Browns last week, I am not trusting the Raiders to win another game this season. I am picking the Chargers, and I'm picking the Chargers to win convincingly. At least by 2 touchdowns. I am, however, curious, is Pete Carroll going to give Kenny Pickett a chance, not only in this game, but at some point later in the season to see what he has, or does he still have this emotional attachment to Geno Smith? With the way it's looking, he has that emotional attachment to Geno Smith, because I feel like if Geno Smith was coached by anyone else, he probably would have been benched maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. But Chargers by at least 2 touchdowns. Sunday night football, Broncos and Commanders. For the Commanders, quarterback Jaden Daniels, he has been cleared to return to practice, but he's unlikely to play this week. Which means once again, it will be Marcus Mariota under center for the Commanders. The Broncos, the big part to their success this season has been their defense. They lead the NFL in sacks with 49 on the season. And the Broncos defense, they've been a difference maker in almost every game this season. As the Broncos, they've only won by more than 7 points 3 times this season. And the fact that the Broncos have only won by more than 7 points 3 times this season, I'm a little skeptical on the Broncos being favored by 6.5. I did mention a couple of weeks ago that I've seen people downplay Bo Nix's performance this season. However, Bo Nix has had better numbers this season than what Peyton Manning had in 2015. And we all know 2015 is when the Broncos won the Super Bowl against the Panthers. As skeptical as I am about this point spread, I'm going to pick the Broncos to win by more than 7 points. I think the Broncos, they take advantage of the situation that they are in. The Commanders, they have been dealing with injuries all season long, as Jaden Daniels has been in and out of the lineup. Terry McLaurin's been out of the lineup. Deebo Samuel, I believe, has been in and out of the lineup as well. I do think it's a convincing win for the Broncos, at least based on how the season's gone for the Broncos. A rare, dominant, and convincing win for the Broncos. Week 13 concludes with Monday Night Football, Giants and Patriots. A matchup between two teams that are trending in opposite directions. The Patriots trending up, 9-game winning streak. The Giants trending down, a 5-game losing streak. The Giants, they have lost their best players for the season. Jackson Dart is still in concussion protocol. Jameis Winston has been the starter for the last couple of games. And the Giants, they've given some valiant efforts last week, taking the Lions to overtime. Patriots quarterback Drake May, he is with Matthew Stafford as far as the frontrunner for the NFL MVP at this point in the season, leading the NFL in passing yards. The Patriots may be on a 9-game winning streak. However, the Patriots, they have failed to cover in 3 of their last 4 games, including last week against the Bengals. While the Giants, despite the losing streak, they've covered in 5 of their last 7 games. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, that Jameis Winston, he may not be the best quarterback. He may be a backup quarterback. He's a career backup, but something he can do is he can make games close. And I think that's the case once again for the 3rd week in a row. I think the Giants, they keep this game close, but the Patriots, they end up winning. I have the Patriots extending their winning streak. However, I think the Giants, they keep this within 7 points. And that will do it for my Week 13 NFL predictions. Comment your predictions down below. My college football picks for this week, for Week 14, the main 7 are uploaded. College football best of the rest will be uploaded at some point tomorrow. And my takeaways from college football and the NFL this past week will be on YouTube Shorts. For those of you that only tune in for the NFL predictions only, enjoy the games this week. Have a great Thanksgiving. I hope to see you back here next week. Thank you for your support, not only this week, but throughout the entire season. And until next time,